In the shadows of a defeated empire, as the ashes of war cooled and the Nuremberg trials sought justice, a hidden network was quietly at work. It wasn't just the infamous leaders the world knew, there were others, lesser-known figures, men whose names rarely make the history books, who slipped through the cracks. They didn't just flee Europe, they orchestrated the very escape routes that allowed the most notorious Nazis to vanish into the sprawling wilderness of Argentina. How did they do it? Who were these men who facilitated one of the most notorious escapes in history? And why did Argentina, of all places, become their safe haven? Today, we uncover the hidden stories of the lesser-known Nazis who fled Europe, their secretive ratlines, and how they paved the way for some of history's most infamous characters to disappear into the shadows. A Heinrich Himmler Secret Service special agent who spoke Spanish with a noticeable Argentine accent landed in Madrid during the last days of World War II. Carlos Fuldner, a 34-year-old former SS captain, was a born opportunist with a knack for deceit. His arrival from Berlin on March 10, 1945, less than 2 months before Hitler committed suicide, gave him a new beginning and would soon provide some of the German regime's most sought-after people a new lease on life. Fuldner was set to be resurrected as the centre of an escape route that would remain open into the early 1950s, arriving on a mission that was not scheduled to start until the end of the war. By the end of his service, Argentina had become a safe haven for hundreds of Nazi collaborators and a massive amount of the most die-hard National Socialists that were wanted by the Allies for their actions during World War II, from Germany, Austria, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Slovakia, and Croatia. Captives from the disbanded German legions were already swarming the Allied POW camps in occupied Europe by the end of 1944. An increasing number of fugitives had begun to enter neutral countries including Spain, Switzerland, Portugal, Austria and Italy even before the war ended. Others gave their anti-communist expertise to Allied intelligence, while others sought asylum with the Catholic Church. The main concern of SS veterans was the Allied war courts. When people like Adolf Eichmann understood they were going to lose, they fell into a depression. Wilhelm Hertel, a fellow SS commander who witnessed Eichmann's fear of post-war retribution, said, "Eichmann had millions of lives on his conscience." These were not unjustified fears. The three main allies made their intention that those responsible for these crimes shall not escape retribution clear on December 17, 1942. As early as July 1943, the Soviets went one step further and tried many Germans who had been apprehended and implicated in the murder of political opponents, such as commissars and so on. By the end of 1944, the BBC had been reporting that war criminals were still being prosecuted and that their identities were being updated on a regular basis. The Nuremberg trial deemed the Nazi Party and the SS to be criminal organizations shortly after the war ended, making all of their former members subject to investigation. Even senior SS leaders, including Reich Security Main Office Chief Ernst Kaltenbrunner, were affected by these broadcasts. According to Hertel, 1961, Kaltenbrunner had also once made the same sort of comment, i.e., that he was considered a war criminal by the Allies. The Reich Security Main Office's top brass accused one another of hiding assets overseas in order to survive after the war. Kaltenbrunner and top SD agent Otto Skorzeny accused Schellenberg of stockpiling money in Switzerland, although there were rumours that Kaltenbrunner was actually making plans for his future while hiding in his home country of Austria. After the war, Theodor Pefgen, the head of the SD department, told American interrogators, "I know that Kaltenbrunner was down south, especially towards the end and shortly before the defeat of Germany. I assume Kaltenbrunner shifted some money across to keep a reserve to assist his future political actions in Austria because his agent, Dr. Hertel, frequently crossed the border into Switzerland or was close to it." The SS leaders started creating false histories for themselves in April 1945 as the Red Army moved closer to Berlin. A senior officer arrived with hundreds of pages on various printed letterheads, Eichmann would subsequently recollect. Fake testimonials with false, innocent-sounding wartime responsibilities were given to the officers. After the war, Eichmann declared, "I was the only one who did not care at all about such false testimonials." It appears that senior Nazis also worked on the escape route issue. The SD Foreign Intelligence branch, to which Fuldner belonged, appears to have been well suited to the work of route preparation, and Nazi operatives with ties to Argentina found themselves in charge of a hurriedly planned operation in Madrid. While the Nazi leadership resisted the advancing Allies in Berlin in the final days of the war, neutral Spain had developed into the primary safe haven for escaped Nazis and their French and Belgian allies escaping from the freed European countries. The parliamentary leader of the fascist Belgian Rexist party, Pierre, Daye, and another Argentine-born SS Secret Service agent, Charles Lesca, both war criminals escaping justice, as well as Radu Genia, the pro-Nazi former Romanian ambassador to Madrid, would soon arrive in the Spanish capital. Before making their own escape to Argentina, they all spent the final days of the war in hiding in Madrid, assisting the escape of French and Belgian collaborators, as well as intelligence agents. Everyone would travel to Buenos Aires to meet Perón. The rescue organization that these guys put together, working with Perón and supported by high-ranking Catholic Church officials, was kept a secret for more than 50 years. So far, its operations would shift from Madrid to Buenos Aires during the next 5 years, and then to Sweden, Switzerland and Italy. Fuldner, Lesca and Daye would flourish in their new roles. Born to German immigrants in Buenos Aires on December 16, 1910, Fuldner would go on to become a leading proponent of the Nazi ideology. Along with his wife and 3 sons, Hugo Fuldner, his father, packed his luggage and left for Germany in 1922. In Kassel, the family made their home. After completing secondary school, young Fuldner tried to pursue a legal education but dropped out after 4 terms. In 1928, Hugo Fuldner had taken his children to the Kassel Civil Registry and registered them as Prussian citizens, deciding that they were permanently back in Germany. However, young Horst Carlos would ultimately hold both citizenships because he was still undecided which one best fit him. He would be Horst to the Germans and Carlos in Argentina for the rest of his life. When he was 20 years old and employed at Cosmos Export in Hamburg, the crucial issue of his required Argentine military duty had to be resolved. He consequently appeared at the Argentine embassy in Berlin in October 1931 with a letter expressing his desire to be released from military duty because he was now a German citizen, despite the fact that he still remained Argentine at heart. "Argentine nationality is not renounceable," was the embassy's succinct response. In the eyes of the Argentine government, young Fuldner abruptly turned into a military deserter. According to the 33 pages of his SS file that have survived, Fuldner was a member of the right-wing ex-servicemen's organisation Young Stahlhelm, Steel Helmet, at that time. More practically speaking, but consistent with his later turbulent path, he was also in trouble for not paying for a train ticket. Fuldner joined Hitler's Special Guard as member number 31,170 after being accepted into the SS in early 1932. He identified himself as an export businessman, was 21 years old, 1.76 meters tall, and wore a size 44 shoe. He was fluent in English, Spanish, French, and German. He was accepted into the Munich Nazi Party in March. He must have impressed because he advanced through the SS ranks swiftly, becoming captain by September 1934. Fuldner was working for the SS newsletter in East Prussia that year, visiting Poland on a regular basis. He accrued a 5,000 mark debt with the SS when he had some trouble paying back the loan for the new Mercedes-Benz. He was given administrative responsibilities and was regarded as smart and effective. His dubious business dealings did not seem to have damaged this reputation yet. His private life was in ruins. He married Hannah Kraus, a 21-year-old German lady, on November 22, 1934, but he left his pregnant wife behind the same year. Friends said that he was quite unhappy. He soon found himself in serious difficulties because of his hunger for other people's money. Fuldner made the decision to leave Germany as soon as possible after defrauding a Hamburg shipping company, a Munich merchant, and reportedly the SS as well. He was accused of fraud, concealment, and disloyalty in Germany. The Argentine SS captain vanished from his Munich lodgings on October 12, 1935. With his expired Argentine passport in hand, Fuldner had visited the Argentine consulate in Hamburg. There, on October 15th, he received a new Argentine paperwork from Bartolomé Daneri, the same ambassador who would subsequently complain loudly about the prohibition against charging Jews for visas. A fairly nervous state, Fuldner informed Daneri that he had changed his mind and now wanted to travel back to Buenos Aires to serve in the military. At Lisbon, he intended to board an ocean liner. The smart young guy had obtained the necessary certificate of good conduct from the Munich police, despite the fact that he was actually fleeing from the SS. Daye was a little perplexed when Fuldner's wife called him 2 days later to inquire if he had visited the embassy to obtain a new Argentine passport. Hannah Kraus claimed that although Fuldner had made a few mistakes at the party, she was able to rectify the problem. To stop her husband before he left Europe, she intended to take a plane to Portugal. She stated that she would stop at nothing to keep her husband from travelling to Buenos Aires, Daye later wrote. By using his new Argentine passport to travel from Germany to France and then to Spain, Fuldner was attempting to put as much space between himself and the SS as possible. He presented the Portuguese immigration authorities with his German passport after exchanging it at the Spanish-Portuguese border. 10 years later, Fuldner was receiving a crash course in passport tactics that would help him when he rescued other SS members from post-war Europe. He appeared on October 16th in the Lisbon office of Ramon Oliveira Cesar, the Argentine consul who would, a few years later, crack down on the issue of visas to Jews in France. Apparently, Fuldner needed a stamp on his new Argentine passport, and the consul kept his German one because Argentina did not permit dual citizenship. Fortunately, this book still exists in the archives of the Argentine Foreign Ministry, and includes the only known photo of Fuldner. Fuldner took a third-class ticket to Buenos Aires on the steamer Antonio Delfino of the Hamburg-Sudamerica line the next day. He was secure for the time being, but the SS would not let him off easy. In fact, Hitler's top brass went to considerable lengths to secure Fuldner's return. His ship was intercepted by the Cap Norte, a liner heading in the opposite way, 10 days later, close to the Brazilian coast and around a day's sail from the port of Bahia. A dejected Fuldner was moved to the ship headed for Hamburg, and a boat was lowered. Invoking his Argentine identity and displaying his Argentine passport, he lodged an angry complaint with Captain Bass of the Cap Norte. "You are German in my opinion," declared the immovable captain. "It is you who belongs to the SS. You swore an oath in German." Fuldner sent urgent telegrams to SS leaders, including Heinrich Himmler. After receiving no response, Fuldner attempted suicide, so Captain Bass decided to confine him to the ship's sickbay for the rest of the voyage. In addition, Fuldner was broke. Captain Bass loaned him 15 marks for a message, while an uncle in Hamburg deposited 100 marks at the Hamburg-Sudamerica line headquarters. Despite his mischief, the young German Argentine was a charming scoundrel. Captain Bass called him polite, polished and good-natured. Fuldner was finally debarked at Bremerhaven and handed up to the Gestapo. The German Argentine was accused of SS desertion, record theft, gambling, money theft and other crimes, expelled from the SS in January 1936. His death's head ring was ritually melted, the utmost humiliation for a Nazi guard, and he was imprisoned to calm down. His luck turned around after the birth of his only daughter Ingrid on May 26, 1936. In 1937, he was exonerated of fraud charges. His last few records from 1938 indicate Fuldner's rejected SS reinstatement application. What Fuldner did next is unknown. After the war, Allied intelligence listed him in a hardcore list of 201 candidates for repatriation from Spain, but made little sense of his career. Before the war, he travelled all over South America, probably in Argentina but also in the United States, revealed a 1945 secret American report. As a lieutenant and German-Spanish interpreter in the Blue Division, he was close to Spain. Berlin was his frequent stop. He eventually joined Findus, a massive Nazi conglomerate that handled German business interests and funded Nazi spies in Spain. Fuldner, as usual, caused difficulties and was dismissed for embezzlement. He alternated between Madrid and Berlin in the final months of the war. Madrid was reached by plane on November 26, 1944, and Berlin in late December. Fuldner appears to have regained his rank by the crucial Monday in March 1945, when he descended the German plane's stepladder in Madrid. He was on a special mission for Himmler's Secret Service, carrying his German and Argentine passports and adding his career-long financial chicanery. In later years, the Argentine SS captain would save numerous former Reich officials and Nazi criminals, including Adolf Eichmann. Did Schellenberg and Himmler plan Fuldner's mission? Fuldner's post-war Madrid actions are poorly documented, but his subsequent activities reflect high-level Nazi involvement. Even the German embassy was confused by Fuldner's Madrid presence. His actions were unclear. American intelligence reported, when asked by German military attaché Hans Daye to justify his presence here, he vaguely said he was there to maintain connections between Spain and Germany, after telling him he had nothing to do with the German embassy. His name was also linked to Nazi post-war resistance group Werewolf. Fuldner flew to Madrid with a plane full of art to sell, possibly to escape. After arriving from Berlin, he placed 45,000 pesetas down for a car. He met with diplomats Joseph Schoof and Wilhelm Petersen, a Nazi acquaintance of Argentine patriot Juan Carlos Goyeneche, at the German embassy where tensions were mounting. Both embassies told Americans Fuldner belongs to the SD, which British intelligence corroborated. Fuldner was protected by Spanish aristocracy and friends. In 1945, Spanish friends of the Blue Division hid the subject in El Escorial and said the most important thing was to save the present situation. He now lives with a family in Calle Duque de Sexto in Madrid, speaks Spanish with an Argentine accent, knows bookkeeping, printing, and many languages. 6 months later, in July 1946, the Allies pursued Fuldner. He frequently moved in with Gonzalo Serrano Fernandez de Villavicencio, the pro-German Blue Division Visconde de Usqueta, because he disliked the Spanish authorities' half-hearted hunt. He moved in with German woman, name unknown, at 33 Modesto La Fuente Street. Another classified 1946 American report claims that Fuldner has fled Madrid and gone into hiding in Terrassa, near Barcelona, because he is being followed by the authorities for incarceration until repatriation. Fuldner occasionally emerged in public after the heat. He knew Spain's most famous bullfighters, the Dominguin brothers. Himmler's secret agent got along with Pierre Daye, Radu Genia, and Blue Division veteran and journalist Victor de la Serna in Madrid. The four covertly met with Perón in Buenos Aires when Fuldner became Nazi rescue team leader. Another major figure is Charles Lesca, a major Perón Odessa member, pioneered Nazi and collaborator escape through Spain. Like Fuldner, Lesca was Argentine. His Atlantic residences included Buenos Aires, Paris, Berlin, Madrid, and the Franco-Spanish border. A 1945 American intelligence report said the serene, beautiful Lesca preferred wearing a German-made beige gabardine topcoat almost crimson. His Berlin colleagues included the German General Staff and the Foreign Ministry. Lesca's wartime contacts included Nazi ambassador to Paris Otto Abetz. Hitler ordered him to seize and protect all public and private art masterpieces on August 3, 1940. Abetz, a Nazi proconsul, stole French museums, galleries, and private collections. War crimes conviction in 1949 led to 20 years in prison. In occupied France, Lesca knew Vichy President Pierre Laval and Representative Fernand de Brinon. Born in Buenos Aires on February 19, 1887, Lesca owned land there and at Saint-Jean-de-Luz in Biarritz, where he married Maria Levray in 1920. He studied in France and volunteered in World War I. The 1930s and 1940s saw Lesca direct right-wing magazines Action Française, Frontières, and Combats. His most notable function was stockholder and editor of the anti-Semitic Je suis partout. Lesca covered Argentine politics in Je suis partout despite living in France for most of his life. On 22nd August 1938, he arrived in Buenos Aires from Trieste and stayed at the Plaza Hotel, meeting nationalists like Cosme Becar Varela. After acquiring his and his wife's Argentine identity papers in Buenos Aires, he returned to Europe in September. He met Juan Perón, a young South American military officer with Nazi intelligence, on one of these journeys. Before Hitler invaded Paris, Lesca was in trouble with the French for helping with the Nazis. Lesca was briefly arrested in 1940, but Hitler's conquest of northern France in June freed him and brought him back into the spotlight, according to one of his Nazi associates. By February 1941, the scurrilous Je suis partout was back on the street, and Lesca wrote When Israel Takes Revenge about his imprisonment. Lesca formed ties with Nazi collaborators, particularly French-speaking Belgian Rexist party members, from his magazine desk throughout the war. Pierre Daye, a frequent visitor to Lesca's Paris office at 186 Rue de Rivoli, was his major Belgian contact. Lesca fled to Berlin in August 1944, just before Paris was liberated, knowing his fate without his Nazi guards. The same path took thousands of French collaborators to Germany. Schellenberg hired many to return home and work for the Germans as intelligence agents. They returned to France via Verona, Innsbruck, and Milan. Lesca may have moved from Berlin to Saint-Jean-de-Luz, near the Franco-Spanish border. American intelligence learned in October 1944 that Lesca was leaving for Argentina due to his big property there. The Lescas received 2 passports from the Argentine consulate in San Sebastian on November 16th. The Argentine consul in Madrid, Nazi collaborator Aquilino Lopez, frequently visited Hendaye on the French side to report and receive orders from his German superiors. San Sebastian became a transit station for fleeing Vichy officials after the war. They received help from Peña, a Franco-aligned Spanish intelligence chief who had worked with German military intelligence as an attaché at the Spanish embassy in Paris. Following the liberation of France, Peña, like Lesca, fled to Berlin before returning to Spain. He recruited runaway Frenchmen for his Franco-era secret agency in San Sebastian. After arriving in Madrid on a special Lufthansa jet with his wife and 2 collaborators in December 1944, Lesca stayed at 4 Victor Hugo Street. Using a fictitious name and carrying a considerable amount of cash from Berlin, he aimed to negotiate a separate peace with the Allies. One SS intelligence operative told American interrogators after the war that the cash were for supporting the Germans already in Spain and others who would have to hide there in future, which was more likely given Lesca's later trajectory. Lesca managed Nazi SD personnel's escape, whether or not it was his mission. The Frenchman wanted to send all German espionage officers to Argentina. Upon arriving, he received 3 million pesetas from the German embassy to aid fleeing French collaborators, while coordinating the evacuation with Peña. Through his links with Spanish intelligence, Lesca helped Nazi spies flee to Argentina with safe refuge and travel documents. With limited success, American intelligence attempted to infiltrate the Lesca-Peña group in 1946. Lesca was accused of being the courier flying via Lufthansa to visit Laval and part of a network into France. The Lesca-Peña group consisted of Daye and Gania. Other comrades included Vichy press attaché Adalbert Lafont, who resigned in protest against General de Gaulle's new government, Frenchman Robert Voineau, and Frenchman Paul Fréchot, whose father lived in Argentina. Pierre Héricourt, a former Action Française associate and Vichy consul in Barcelona, was a war criminal. According to American intelligence, Walter Schellenberg helped Berlin restaurateur Otto Hawker open the private Hawker restaurant on Alfonso Street in 1943. The gang often met there. Hawker allegedly transferred 250,000 Swiss francs from Germany to Nazi diplomats in Lisbon and converted them to pesetas on the black market to open his Madrid branch, a money laundering operation allegedly organized by Walter Eugen Mosig, another Schellenberg agent in Argentina. Schellenberg reportedly helped Hawker move German furniture and silverware. The Hawker restaurant in Berlin was once a popular spot for top Nazi officials like Göring and Himmler, with secret microphones planted to record conversations of foreign guests. By 1946, the restaurant's owner, also named Hawker, had relocated to Madrid, where he became nervous about media attention in the US and considered emigrating to Argentina. However, he ultimately stayed, and the Madrid location remains an elite establishment to this day. Lesca claimed he was the first to establish the escape route to Argentina, a claim supported by his personal relationship with Argentina's President Perón. In early 1946, he revealed to SS agent Hans Sommer that he had known Perón since trips to Argentina in the 1930s and maintained recent contact through the Argentine embassy. With Perón's election win, the Nazi underground in Madrid eagerly awaited a way to evacuate their agents. Sommer, cautious not to raise suspicion, couldn't press Lesca for details on his connections to Perón. The evacuation was top priority for Lesca, who planned to depart for Argentina soon. During their meeting, Lesca even took a call about yet another person who was eager to leave hiding, asking when the escape plans would be activated. Through trusted contacts like Spy Chief Peña, Lesca and his associates coordinated escapes, including the protection and relocation of Luftwaffe General Eckhard Kramer, who had smuggled a convoy of stolen art into Spain. Betrayed by another German, Kramer had to be hidden at a Spanish officer's estate before he could be moved safely to Argentina. Peña's network used a blacklist to prevent further betrayals and keep their network secure. Sommer realized that infiltrating Lesca's circle would be nearly impossible. The group was fanatical, long connected, and well protected by the Spanish police, army, and intelligence services. Attempts to arrest them were futile, as Spanish authorities would warn the group in advance. Lesca's circle believed a conflict between the Allies and the Soviet Union was inevitable and aimed to exploit it for their own purposes. By August or September 1946, plans were in motion to smuggle 150 to 200 Germans from Cadiz to Argentina, a few at a time, using Spanish identity papers from Franco's regime. The American embassy in Buenos Aires reported sightings of German agents arriving from Spain disguised as priests and deserters from Spanish ships. One of the first to use Lesca's escape route was Carlos Reuter, an SD agent born in Hamburg and raised in Buenos Aires. Reuter had returned to Germany in 1938 and during the war lived in occupied Paris, recruiting Latin Americans for German intelligence. Reuter was captured by American forces during the liberation of Paris. However, he managed to secure his release by leveraging his Argentine citizenship, a tactic that bought him both freedom and time. By December 1944, Reuter had fled to Madrid, where he reconnected with Lesca, an influential figure in the Nazi escape network. Soon afterward, he tested the ratline escape route Lesca was establishing and successfully made his way to Buenos Aires in early 1946, just days before Juan Perón's presidential victory. Reuter settled with his wife in the exclusive Barrio Norte neighborhood and was entrusted with preparing the foundation for a large-scale emigration plan orchestrated by Lesca. His actions fueled speculation that he was part of a German intelligence network in South America, quietly laying the groundwork for a new network abroad. By mid-1946, Lesca himself began preparing for his departure. Bidding farewell to his associates in Madrid, he travelled to Bilbao, where Franco's former foreign minister hosted him in grand style. From there, he set sail from Barcelona to Argentina on September 10th. His journey was shadowed by American intelligence, and French officials issued warnings to the Brazilian and Uruguayan governments about his suspicious possession of gold coins and diamonds. Although he faced a temporary detainment in Brazil, authorities allowed him to continue after verifying his valid Argentine passport, and Lesca narrowly escaped arrest. However, his luck ran out in Uruguay, where he and his wife were detained, facing a potential extradition to France. News of his arrest made headlines in Buenos Aires, yet, in a twist of fate, the couple escaped their confinement, likely with the aid of bribery, and reached Argentina by late October. Once in Buenos Aires, Lesca adopted a low profile, settling in Barrio Norte and instructing his doorman to deny his presence while receiving any official mail, especially anything marked with the Argentine Army's seal. Meanwhile, in Paris, he was tried in absentia for collaborating with the enemy, with the French government formally requesting his extradition. Argentina's Perón administration, however, ignored this request, and in May 1947, Lesca was sentenced to death by a French court. Despite this, he seemed unfazed, writing to his friend and collaborator Pierre Daye, who also faced a death sentence, that he remained calm and only regretted the public attention. Lesca's successful escape and setup in Argentina marked the beginning of a well-organized route for many other war criminals, a network that Daye would later systematize. Daye, a high-profile collaborator with powerful ties to figures like Hitler, Pope Pius, and other political leaders, coordinated with Perón to establish a formal rescue network. Born into an elite Brussels family, Daye had been a diplomat, journalist, and soldier, making him well-connected across Europe and beyond. His influence would play a crucial role in structuring the escape route that allowed many high-ranking Nazis and collaborators to flee Europe and find refuge in South America. Pierre Daye was a prolific writer and thinker with a passion for adventure. In 1925, he made his way to Argentina by joining the crew of a 6,000-ton cargo ship to Montevideo after failing to convince his newspaper Soir to fund his travels. This experience, which he later recounted in unpublished memoirs, took him from the intellectual circles of Brussels and Paris into the rugged, unpolished world of sailors. Living among these rough sea fellows gave Daye a fresh perspective on the working class, whose struggles he believed drove them toward revolutionary movements. He arrived in Buenos Aires on September 3, 1925, as a single 33-year-old Catholic diplomat. Argentina at the time was booming, fueled by meat exports, with Buenos Aires alive with tango music and a diverse mix of European immigrants. Daye was drawn to the city's underworld, particularly La Boca, a lively immigrant neighborhood full of tango bars, dock workers, and a vibrant underbelly. The enormous slaughterhouses, red with blood and stinking with dead livestock, symbolized Argentina's wealth, and Daye embraced the raw, unfiltered life he found in the city, far from the aristocratic settings he had known in Europe. Though fascinated by Buenos Aires' low life, Daye's connections soon allowed him access to the city's high society. He visited the luxurious North Side, attended gatherings at the prestigious Jockey Club with its grand onyx staircase and vast wine cellar, and received invitations to the opera at the Colón Theatre. He was even welcomed at the home of Leopoldo Lugones, a poet whose authoritarian views influenced Argentina's dictatorship. Daye admired Lugones, unaware of the darker legacy his son would later create. inventing the electric cattle prod that became a notorious torture tool in Argentina's political repression. After his time in Argentina, Daye returned to Europe, where his career gained momentum in the 1930s. Once a lesser-known diplomat in Tehran, he soon joined Belgium's pro-Nazi Rexist party and mingled with figures like Hitler, Hess and von Ribbentrop. Party leader Léon de Grelle appointed him to a legislative role in 1936, and Daye eagerly attended the grand Nazi rallies, impressed by the spirit and discipline he saw there. His admiration for the Nazi cause, which he described as a triumphant revolution, would shape his path and alliances for years to come. On September 11th, Pierre Daye met with Hitler for tea. Although Hitler appeared somewhat reserved, Daye noted his simple dignity and undeniable glamour, sensing that the Führer connected deeply with the people. The following day, he met with Ribbentrop to discuss strengthening Belgian-German ties, an encounter that left Daye exhilarated. Upon returning to Brussels, he and Rexism leader Léon de Grelle stirred up media attention when they drove to Berlin in a Rolls-Royce for another meeting, which included breakfast at Ribbentrop's estate. Along the way, their car overturned near Hanover, injuring de Grelle's wife, but miraculously sparing both men. During this visit, Daye reconnected with Otto Abetz, his old acquaintance who would go on to become the Nazi proconsul in occupied France. By December, Daye was back in Germany, giving lectures to promote National Socialism, which he praised in his memoirs as one of the most fundamental phenomena of our century. In 1938, Daye met Hitler again, with Hess as a translator, solidifying his loyalty to the Nazi regime. Daye's intellectual fascination with Nazism deepened, but his restless nature soon led him to leave the Rexist Party in 1939 and join the Belgian Catholic Party. He resumed his journalism career and was appointed international editor for Nouveau Journal. When the Nazis invaded Belgium in May 1940, Daye found himself in Paris, where he witnessed Hitler's triumphant entry into the city in August. Fully aligning himself with the pro-Nazi cause, Daye openly advocated for collaboration with Germany's occupiers, frequently contributing to Je suis partout, France's leading pro-collaborationist publication, alongside Charles Lesca and other prominent anti-Semitic writers. Daye's network extended beyond France and Germany. He regularly visited the Reich and maintained strong ties with key Nazi allies, including Marshal Pétain in Vichy and Ribbentrop in Berlin. His connection with Spanish ambassador José Félix de la Quérica in Paris would later prove invaluable, especially in 1944, when Daye needed to escape to Madrid amid Allied advances. By 1943, Daye had fully rejoined the Rexist movement and was appointed Belgian sports minister under Nazi occupation, symbolizing his high-ranking collaboration. In late 1942, Daye travelled to Rome, meeting with Pope Pius XII and high-ranking Vatican officials. He noted an ostentatious Anglophilia among Italian elites at this time, sensing early signs of waning fascist loyalty. Despite this, Daye was more interested in Vatican views on Nazism versus communism, hoping to gauge the Church's potential alignment with the Nazi regime. He expressed his subtle observations in columns for Nouveau Journal and Petit Parisien, yet he conveyed his concerns more explicitly in a confidential report for Belgium's King Leopold. On January 6th, 1943, Daye visited the Vatican in an open carriage, marvelling at the grandeur of royal apartments, Raphael's paintings, and the ceremonial Swiss guards as he prepared for a private meeting with Pope Pius XII. Today, this audience was pivotal, symbolizing an opportunity to strengthen ties between Catholicism and Nazi ideology, aligning the Church with what he saw as the fight against communist influence in Europe. This meeting marked a defining moment in Daye's dedication to advancing Nazi aims across political, social, and religious spheres during the war. When Pierre Daye was granted an audience with Pope Pius XII, he was initially asked to rise after kneeling. Following brief questions about the Belgian royal family, the Pope shifted the conversation, inquiring bluntly about General von Falkenhausen, the German military governor of Belgium. Falkenhausen, who would later be implicated in the July 20th plot against Hitler and sentenced by a Belgian court after the war, was considered by the Pope to be a good man. Daye, ever cautious, responded that although he hadn't met Falkenhausen personally, he believed the general had shown goodwill in an extremely difficult situation. The Pope, however, was quick to express disappointment, pointing out that Falkenhausen had closed the Vatican nunciature in Brussels. Still, Pope Pius XII raised his arms in a blessing, offering Daye, his family and Belgium the apostolic blessing with the words, May God keep you, your loved ones, and your beloved nation safe. In his memoirs, Daye described the meeting with a sense of frustration. He had hoped for clarity on the Vatican's stance during the war, but found the Vatican's political views evasive. One high-ranking Vatican official suggested that the Church viewed Nazism as a more dangerous ideology than Bolshevism due to its profound mysticism, making it a greater threat to Catholic influence. The response did little to satisfy Daye, who pressed for further explanation. Finally, the Vatican official gave an unusually candid reply, comparing the Church's role to a cat attempting to cross a table without disturbing fragile crystal. This metaphor left Daye feeling that the Church's caution would prevent any decisive action against either Nazism or communism. Back in Paris, Daye's influence allowed him to use his connections with Otto Abetz and the Belgian legation to quietly aid Belgian nationals who had fallen into political trouble. Through these ties, he arranged safe passage for Belgians and, when possible, protected them from German arrests. He later claimed that these efforts were not political, stating that he assisted Belgians of all viewpoints, yet this work subtly foreshadowed his later role in Argentina, where he would assist collaborators escaping Allied justice. Despite limited finances, Daye led a luxurious life in Paris, frequently dining at elite establishments like Maxim's and the Tour d'Argent, which had been reopened by the Berlin restaurateur Horscher. Here he mingled with Vichy officials, Nazi elites, and Parisian celebrities, including stage stars Cécile Sorel and Maurice Chevalier. He often dined with the Spanish ambassador Leclerc and Abetz himself, who maintained a close watch over collaborationist circles in France. Once Daye noted Hermann Göring dining alone, dressed entirely in beige with enormous rings on his fingers, surrounded by lavish purple tulips, projecting an image of quiet power. By early 1944, as the tide of the war shifted against Germany, Daye sensed the collapse of the Nazi cause. Holding the official position of Belgian sports minister under German occupation, he discreetly sought a visa for Spain, planning his departure from Brussels. By spring, he had reached Madrid officially on diplomatic business and met with General Moscardo, head of physical fitness programs in Barcelona. But Daye felt that his journey marked the beginning of a prolonged exile. As the Allies advanced with the D-Day landings, he imagined his associates in Brussels lamenting his warnings as news from Germany grew increasingly desperate. He noted in his memoirs that Berlin's communications had become anxious and panicked, and he viewed the German embassy's urgent calls for his return to Brussels with growing suspicion, sensing Germany's imminent collapse. Avoiding a return through France, Daye feared the violent conditions there as Allied forces reclaimed the region. His diary reflected his concerns. Cars are being machine-gunned, trains are bombed, murders are occurring under the guise of swift justice. He wrote about the chaos spreading across France and anticipated that Belgium would soon face the same. Realizing that fervent, violent maniacs were taking control in liberated regions, Daye decided to remain in Spain, where he could ensure his safety. His foresight proved accurate. By August 25th, Paris had been liberated, and on September 3rd, General Montgomery led Allied forces into Brussels. Belgian collaborators were swiftly arrested, and Daye noted with relief that he was in friendly Spain, far from the widespread violence and vengeance sweeping through Belgium. He viewed this period as one of excitement, crime, and raw retaliation, and was grateful for the sanctuary he found in Spain, aware that his decision to stay there likely saved his life from the chaotic post-liberation retributions in Belgium. In Madrid, Pierre Daye found refuge at the Anglo-American Club, where he spent his days conversing about politics and literature with Walter Starkey, the director of the British Council. Evenings brought a sense of quiet solitude as Daye strolled the streets of Madrid, leaving his room at the luxurious Palace Hotel to wander the city, encountering other exiles, criminals, and outcasts from across Europe. As he passed the Ritz, he would see British envoy Samuel Hoare celebrating Allied triumphs, which stirred conflicted feelings in him. Daye looked up at the clear skies, sharing the same stars seen over Belgium, though he felt an immense distance from his country's turmoil. As news arrived from Belgium and France, Daye's spirits sank. The once familiar world he had left behind was now filled with reports of retribution. Collaborators were being executed, friends were appearing on lists of traitors, and the director of Nouveau Journal, Paul Hurton, had been executed. The pressure mounted as Daye received letters from fellow Rexists who had taken refuge in Berlin. In early February, Daye was devastated by the news of Robert Brasillac's execution by firing squad. Reflecting on the fate of his old friend, he wrote in his diary of the profound isolation and despair he felt in Madrid. Madrid was becoming a haven for fugitives and refugees, with more of Daye's friends and allies arriving daily. Charles Lesca joined him, bringing his wife and immediately integrating into Daye's circle of exiles who gathered at the Horca restaurant. This group included influential Spanish figures such as José Ignacio Escobar, director of Acción Española, and Mariano Daranas from the ABC newspaper, along with Manuel Aznar, a prominent journalist and future ambassador to Buenos Aires. By February 1946, Daye had moved from the palace to the more affordable Victoria Hotel. Fully committed to assisting his fellow exiles, he used his connections with sympathetic Spanish authorities to arrange the release of imprisoned collaborators, secure employment for refugees, and organize safe passage for those stranded in camps. Many of these refugees had crossed the Pyrenees on foot, arriving penniless, without identification, and abandoned by Belgian diplomatic services and the Red Cross, who labelled them traitors. Daye took on the role of an informal consul for these exiled Belgians, tirelessly visiting camps, hospitals and government offices, advocating on behalf of these traitors and fugitives, and pleading with authorities to offer them protection and assistance. In his later reflections, he expressed a sense of purpose in helping brave young men, despite his own precarious status, working to provide a lifeline for those who had lost everything. In 1946, as Francoist Spain began shifting politically, Daye faced increasing pressure. On May 23rd, he was summoned to the Seguridad headquarters and told to prepare to leave the country. Furious, Daye sent letters to his influential allies, including Franco's brother-in-law Serrano Suñer and the director of Seguridad. He reminded them of his past support for Franco, including his visit to Burgos in 1938. He questioned what they hoped would happen to him and where he could possibly seek safety. Rumours soon surfaced that Belgium had requested Daye's extradition, and the new Spanish Foreign Minister, Martin Artayo, seemed eager to comply in order to gain favour with the Allies. Daye's name appeared on a blacklist alongside other Belgian collaborators. Realising his time in Madrid was running out, Daye, influenced by Perón's recent election in Argentina, considered fleeing to Buenos Aires, where the escape routes for Nazi operatives were opening up. But his options were limited. He could not enter France, the US, or any allied nations, and most neutral countries were too frightened to accept him. Determined, Daye sought a visa from the Argentine embassy, but the political climate had shifted and his escape plans were now more difficult. Lesca's arrest in Montevideo had made things even more complicated. His situation became further desperate when his friend Gainea, who worked tirelessly to secure a Romanian passport for him, offered help. However, Daye eventually discarded the passport, knowing that his inability to speak Romanian would make it too risky. By December 1946, as his trial in Brussels loomed, Daye fell into a deep despair. His companion Lesca was safely in Argentina, but Daye felt increasingly isolated. He withdrew from the Belgian press, spending his time writing in his diary, imagining a conversation where he defended his actions. He reflected on his decision to collaborate with Germany in 1940, believing at the time that the German victory was inevitable. His trial ended on December 18th, when he was sentenced to death by firing squad, stripped of his citizenship, and ordered to pay 5 million francs in damages. Cut off from all news, Daye only learned of his sentence on Christmas Eve. Surprisingly, he remained calm, eating heartily with a few loyal friends who wished him well. The ruling made life in Europe unbearable. Daye felt like an outcast, shunned by most of his acquaintances. He withdrew from the world, sometimes going days without speaking to anyone, living a vegetative existence. Only a few faithful friends remained by his side as he faced the bleak future ahead. Pierre Daye's escape to Argentina was made possible by powerful allies within the Argentine government, including Hipólito Paz, a young figure who would become a key player in Daye's survival as Perón's foreign minister and advisor. By 1947, Buenos Aires was fast becoming a preferred refuge for top Nazi officials, collaborators, and war criminals fleeing post-war Europe. Argentina, under Juan Perón's leadership, offered an inviting sanctuary, actively facilitating the emigration of these individuals as part of a broader strategy to position Argentina as a powerful, independent player on the global stage. For Daye and other French and Belgian collaborators stranded in Madrid, the political climate was growing hostile, and they were being pressured to depart toward the unknown. In many cases, this unknown led them to Argentina, where Buenos Aires had become a magnet for Nazi fugitives. On April 26, 1947, 3 years after Daye had arrived in Madrid, he finally received approval for his Argentine visa. Using this to persuade Spanish officials to grant him a stateless passport that would only allow him entry into Argentina, he added his mother's Spanish-sounding maiden name, Adan, becoming Pierre Daye Adan, to blend in. On May 21st, 1947, Daye arrived at Madrid's Barajas aerodrome with a sense of liberation, boarding his flight to South America. After seeing Lesca encounter complications at sea, Daye opted for air travel, confident it was faster and less likely to attract attention. He calculated that in the 36 hours it would take to reach Buenos Aires, any attempt by Belgian agents to secure an arrest order would be too late. As the plane took off from Madrid, he felt the weight of his past lifting. Watching a pink sunrise break over the city, he felt his spirits rise as they passed Seville and continued south, soaring over Morocco, Cap Juby and Villa Cisneros, the last Spanish outpost in Africa on the edge of the Senegalese desert. After a brief breakfast stop, surrounded by blue-shadowed mejaristes, Daye felt as if he were growing younger, casting off years of tension as he approached the open sea. Crossing the Atlantic in a 4-engine Douglas, cruising at 400 km per hour, Daye experienced an almost ecstatic sense of freedom, imagining himself beyond Europe's reach. "Out there they can fight it out," he wrote. "They might even search for me, but they can't reach me. I fly toward peace, far away from a mad world." The final stop in Montevideo went smoothly, with no alerts or intervention from Uruguayan authorities. At noon, the plane finally touched down at Morón Aerodrome outside Buenos Aires. Under the bright Argentine sun, Daye was greeted by a familiar network of exiles, Charles Lesca, Georges Guilbeault, and Robert Pincerman, along with Mario Amadeo, a former Nazi informant and influential foreign policy advisor to Perón. This welcoming committee of collaborators marked Argentina's commitment to becoming a safe haven for Europe's Nazi fugitives. For Daye, the moment was unforgettable. He described himself as Pedro de Adan, radiant, standing in the federal capital of welcoming Argentina. Buenos Aires, which had become a hub for some of the most notorious Nazi war criminals, now offered him a new life, marking the end of his perilous journey across continents. Argentina would now be home, a place where he and others like him could find refuge from a Europe determined to hold them accountable. Many others were some of the most notorious figures of the Nazi regime, who used the country as a safe haven to evade capture and continue their lives under new identities. Adolf Eichmann, one of the chief architects of the Holocaust, lived quietly in Buenos Aires under the alias Ricardo Clement. Eichmann's role in orchestrating the deportation of millions to concentration camps made him one of the most wanted war criminals of the post-war period. He was eventually captured by Mossad agents in a daring operation in 1960 and brought to Israel for trial, where he was executed in 1962. His capture marked one of the most dramatic episodes of post-war World War II. Another infamous fugitive, Joseph Mengele, known as the Angel of Death, conducted medical experiments on prisoners. Mengele initially fled to Argentina, where he lived comfortably under the protection of sympathetic networks. Despite numerous efforts to track him down, Mengele eluded capture and died in Brazil in 1979. Erich Priebke, an SS officer involved in the massacre of 335 Italians in the Ardeatine caves near Rome, also sought refuge in Argentina. Priebke lived openly in the picturesque town of Bariloche for decades, even operating a delicatessen. His past caught up with him in the 1990s when journalists exposed his identity, leading to his extradition and trial in Italy, where he was convicted of war crimes. Argentina was also home to Walter Rauff, a former SS officer. He lived in South America for years, avoiding extradition due to political protections and loopholes. Other lower-profile but influential figures included SS officers, scientists, and engineers who blended into expatriate communities or contributed their expertise to Argentina's military-industrial ambitions. Bariloche in particular became synonymous with Nazi refugees. Nestled in the Andes, it attracted numerous German settlers, including former Nazis. The most infamous rumour tied to Bariloche involves Martin Bormann, Hitler's deputy, who some claim escaped there. While evidence of Bormann's survival has been largely debunked, the legend persists and fuels the mystique of Argentina as a haven for Nazi fugitives. And with that, we wrap up today's video. I'm incredibly grateful to have you here until the end. Your support truly means the world to me. A huge shout out to my amazing patrons. If you'd like to support the channel or get access to some exclusive content, the links to my Patreon and Instagram are down below. I hope you learned something new, and as always, I'll see you in the next adventure. Take care and goodbye for now.